Well, if you've got your Bibles, turn them to Mark chapter 5. We're making our way through this incredible recounting of the life and ministry and teaching of Jesus. Mark is one of the four Gospels, and Mark certainly has a very unique style, personality, and purpose in the writing of his Gospel, as each of the Gospel writers themselves do. But Mark is, I think in many ways, because of the audience he was writing to, Mark is a gospel that is, I think, particularly attuned to the perspectives and the worldview that impacts the context in which we live. And so I personally have been very much enjoying our series, and I hope you are as well. This is one of the most interesting and dynamic stories in the Gospel of Mark, and it reminds me in a unique way of a very frustrating moment I had growing up with my father. I love my dad. My dad's been gone now for over 20 years. And so when I look back and I think about those moments, I have the difficult times, like all parental-child relationships, there were difficult times. The difficult times have become good times. The good times have been great times. And the perplexing moments have become entertaining times. One of the most entertaining, if we'll put it that way, moments was at a significant technological advance in society that impacted the Eby household. Now, today, our goal in buying a television is as big a screen as you can get and as thin as it will come. TVs have essentially become disposable. We buy them, it eventually goes out, we get a new one. Unless, of course, you can get a hold of Scott Wright and he will come and fix your television. That's what he does. I'm looking for Scott. He's probably making count in the back. But back then, we had TVs weren't flat, hung on a wall. They were in and of themselves pieces of furniture. The big giant console TVs, and I remember we had that big console TV, which eventually and ultimately would go out. The tube would go out. It'd be too expensive to fix it. So then you would put the smaller TV on top of the console TV, and it became your entertainment. How many of you ever had a small TV on top of your big console TV? Yeah. The beginning of the entertainment center. All right. Well, the TV was one thing, but more important than the TV was in my late childhood, so early youth, my parents made the very important and dramatic technological leap to embrace that new technology called cable television. Because all of a sudden, instead of the 4 local channels, the 3 major networks, and PBS, now we had the ability to get clear, uninterrupted signal in color, a variety of channels. Now, my family did this for a deeply and profoundly spiritual reason, because you could watch every Cubs game on WGN. So we got cable television, and I'll never forget, I was so excited. We were getting cable, and we got it installed, and then we had to go to the cable store to pick up our cable box. Very exciting moment. I'm there for whatever reason. My dad took me with him, and we went to the store. We went in, and my dad said, yeah, they've run the cable into the house. We need the box to hook it up. And so we got the cable box. And the person working the counter said, oh, just a moment, let me get your remote. And my dad said, remote? And they said, yeah, this box comes with a remote. My dad said, well, how much does it cost? And they said, no, the remote comes at no charge with the cable box. And I'm thinking, this is the American dream. Not only do I get 30 channels, I know, it was a different age, I was excited, it was only 30, but it was a big time 30 at that point. Not only do I get to have 30 unlimited, seemingly unlimited to me, channels, I get to live the real American dream. I don't even have to stand up to change the channel anymore. And so I'm all excited. We're getting a remote. The person pulls the remote from under the counter and begins to hand it to my dad, and my dad goes, we don't need it. We don't need it? What are you talking about? We don't need it. It doesn't cost anything. We don't have to stand up. We don't have to go up to the TV and flip the dial every time we want to change the channel. What do you mean we don't need it? So we don't need it. I said, Dad, do you understand it's free? He says, yeah. And I'll never forget his words. The person working the counter was stunned too. Well, you don't want the complimentary remote? No. And then I'll never forget, he looked at me and he goes, "That's what I've got him for." To this day, I do not understand why my dad didn't want the remote. He didn't seem to be one of those people, and looking back, he must have been much more than I realized, a person who just didn't like change of any type. I don't know any other reason you don't want a free, again, unless, of course, in his mind, he's thinking ahead and thinking, maybe my son needs a little extra exercise. I'm not certain. But there are moments in our lives where the change, when the opportunity, when the resource is presented to us, that by all measures, by all evaluations, by anything you could look at, just makes sense. The cost doesn't matter. There's not a cost. There's just simply some change being brought into it. And sometimes we're so deeply ingrained in our patterns, in our habits, in our backgrounds, in our worldview, our value system, that what is, by all practical measures, an incredibly easy choice, people resist. Well, that to me is very much like the story that we find in Mark chapter 5. If you've got your Bibles, in Mark chapter 5, you can take a look. I think we're going to be able to put it up on the screen. And this is the story. As we set the scene last week, Jesus had been doing a significant amount of ministry in the area around where he lived in Capernaum, which is on the Sea of Galilee. And Jesus then gets in a boat and goes across the sea, probably 4 to 5 miles across the northern part of the Sea of Galilee, southeast to another region. Well, the Gospels tell us the story this way. They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he had often been chained hand and foot, but tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on a nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs. Allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and the countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man, and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. We have unfolded for us in this story one of the most remarkable and dramatic scenes of Jesus' entire ministry. And to understand the significance of all that's going on, we got to set it in its right context again. Remember, Jesus has been in his home region, which is on the north and northwest side of the Sea of Galilee. This is an area that Jesus had grown up in. People knew him. They were familiar with him. He's in the synagogues there, and he's teaching, and multitudes are coming because people are being healed. The oppressed are being set free. His teaching is unlike anything they'd ever encountered before. And so great were the multitudes that Jesus physically was being pressed into exhaustion and even in danger from the crush of the crowd. Thousands were coming from the entire region to hear him, to ask for his miraculous touch. These were incredible days. These are near the earliest moments of Jesus' ministry and at some of the highest points of his popularity. If you remember, so many people had gathered to hear him on the shores of the Sea of Galilee that he had to get into a boat to even begin to address them because they were concerned about the crush of the crowd. And he teaches and then he says, hey, let's go on over to the other side. The same boat he taught from now becomes the boat that takes him across the Sea of Galilee. He's going across, and if you remember, he's exhausted from the demands of ministry placed upon him, physically and emotionally drained, and he falls asleep. It wasn't a long journey. It was probably a matter of hours at most. And yet Jesus, so drawn upon by the people who reached out to him, was simply exhausted and fell asleep in the back of the boat. Terrible storm spikes on the Sea of Galilee, and the little boat that was filled to full capacity begins to be rocked by the wind and the waves begin to break over the side of the boat and fill up the boat to the point that they are afraid for their lives. Jesus is awoken, and he speaks just the simple rebuke to the winds and to the waves. Be still. And a great calm comes over the sea. They finish the journey. They get to this area of Gadara, the Gadarenes. And as soon as they get out of the boat, there comes a man running at the crowd or the group, just a small collection. There was Jesus, his disciples, and then a couple other boats that came with them. But the multitudes have been left aside. The multitudes have been left behind. And now as Jesus steps onto the shore on the southeast direction from where he had been, this man races at him. The other Gospels actually tell us that in this story, Mark is focusing on the interaction with the one. There were actually two. But in this story, Mark focuses in on the one. This man had become so overcome by demonic forces that manipulated and controlled and used him. People were terrified to go near him. He was possessed of a strength that went beyond just pure human strength. They tried to bind him and he would break the chains. I will tell you, I have seen with my own eyes, heard with my own ears, firsthand events that make me connect to the reality that this is no fanciful mythology. This is the description of a reality of something that happened. I've not only seen and heard it with my own eyes, I know countless people serving here and around the world that have encountered moments similar to this. The man rushes at Jesus in this area that we don't really know a lot about because we're just so far connected. But when Jesus went to this area, it was an area called the Decapolis, which is a great Greek word. The first part, deca, which means 10, and polis. And if you see this in any of the, like Indianapolis or Minneapolis, that simple polis means city. So the Decapolis means 10 cities. We tend to think of Jesus' ministry really being almost exclusively focused on the people of the regions where the Jewish people lived. And certainly in contemporary understanding, we'd put all of this in the realm of Israel. But these were days of unrest and uncertainty and colonization. And it wasn't just Jewish people that lived in this area. In fact, in the area that Jesus lands on the shores there on the Sea of Galilee was not known for its overwhelming Jewish population, but that it had been a community settled. The 10 cities of the Decapolis had been settled by the descendants of Alexander the Great, the Greek emperor. After conquering the world, he settled many of his soldiers in this area in 10 cities that were established. They became a colony, an outpost of the Greek Empire. Because what the Greeks loved to do is they loved to import their culture, their writings, their philosophy, their literature, their language. And so that's what they do right there in the Decapolis. And clearly there are Jewish people and there are Greek people, and now there are Romans that are living in this area as well, colonized Romans. And Jesus steps onto this shore outside of the confines of his normal area, his people group, his comfortable community where everybody knew him. And he's confronted by this demonic individual. And he delivers him after one of the most interesting and unusual conversations recorded for us in Scripture. Jesus has a conversation with the demonic power. He says, "What's your name?" But, again, my first impulse in those moments is not a conversation, but then again, I'm not Jesus. Jesus said, "What's your name?" He said, "Well, we don't have one name. They call us a legion because we are many." Jesus rebukes these demonic influences that have twisted and destroyed. And it wasn't just that he made other people afraid by his actions. He was bound. He had to live in isolation amongst the caves that were the tombs of that community. He lived amongst the bones of the dead. And when the spirit in him lashed out at others, when there was no one else to lash out on, it lashed out on him. He cut himself. The suffering had to be immense. Jesus frees him. And in freeing him, the demonic powers say, "Don't cast us out." They still want to wreak havoc. They still want to cause chaos. They still want to bring destruction. And don't cast us out. And there was this herd of pigs. Now, if you don't pay attention to the story, you miss the significance of this. These are pigs. Why in the world are there pigs in this region? The Jewish people, by the law of God in the Old Testament, saw pigs as unclean, impure animals that had no place in Jewish society. And there are many Jewish people, and probably more than likely, the people Jesus is interacting with, more than likely were Jewish individuals. Even though the area was heavily influenced by Greek culture, Jesus is probably, because Jesus' ministry was focused at this point on the people of Israel, the Jewish people. So here we have a flock of 2,000 pigs being tended probably by Jewish individuals. Jesus casts these demonic spirits out and they rush into these pigs. And the scriptures tell us that the pigs go jumping off the side of a cliff, drown themselves in the water. And I can't help it. I know it's Old Testament law and everything. I'm just thinking, so much bacon, so much waste. So much bacon. The man who's been controlled and influenced and destroyed, and a community that's been afflicted by this man's life and behavior. They all from the community come out. Jews and Greeks. And here he is, fully clothed, sitting at Jesus' feet. Scriptures say, in his right mind. What a moment. I mean, really, think about what a moment. This isn't just for this guy, the whole community. What a moment. I mean, this had to hurt tourism on the Sea of Galilee, because every time a boat showed up, this crazy guy comes running out of the tombs causing trouble. Now they've got peace and calm. You would think everybody's response would be one of happiness and celebration, apart from just the comfort they got. But here, isn't there something within the human heart that would just be happy for an afflicted, destroyed, isolated, wounded, sick individual to find wholeness after many, many years? Wouldn't you think that by itself would bring joy? And yet, what's the response? They say, would you please leave? Jesus, why don't you go? I mean, what a ridiculous... to me, this is like that moment that I'm standing in the cable shop going, we're really not taking the remote? Here's a man who shows up on your shores, who has a reputation in the entire region as a miracle worker, a healer, a prophet, a teacher of God's ways, who sets one of the most dramatic and difficult individuals that anyone had ever encountered free, and in a moment, by a word spoken, restores everything that darkness had stole from him. And instead of celebrating, instead of rejoicing, instead of using this as a great moment for him and for the society, they say to Jesus, please go. There's so many things in that moment I don't understand. I don't understand Jesus. I don't understand Jesus in one way. By my own evaluations, by my own perspectives, by my own framework, I don't understand Jesus. Jesus is at the pinnacle of his popularity. Thousands of people are coming to him in a place that has overwhelmingly at that moment embraced him. And he leaves. If you remember from last week, he just simply says, let's go to the other side. He left multitudes who were there to hear him, to be instructed by him, to experience him. See, in our society, in our culture, bigger, better, more, that's all that we ever see and evaluate. To me, that's the moment you go, Jesus, you're getting there. You're getting it done. Everybody wants to hear you. Everybody wants to see you. Everybody's looking to you. You have a moment, a platform unlike anyone. You can change the world from Capernaum. And Jesus says, hey, let's go to the other side. That aren't my people. That aren't my place. And there's no multitude waiting for him there. There's one lunatic that lives in the graveyard. See, that doesn't make sense to me, because I have been conditioned to believe more is better. Bigger is better. A multitude is better than a small group. I'm just conditioned that way, which is why I've begun to hate summer. Vacation's just got to stop. We got to stop this. I want everybody to come back to church. I don't understand Jesus' perspective sometimes. At least how I evaluate life. And not only did he leave popularity in the multitudes, he left it to experience danger, right? Remember, there was a storm that came up that almost killed everybody. I'm sure the disciples are sitting there going, okay, let me get this straight. We're leaving the big crowd. We're leaving popularity and effectiveness. And we almost died. And we did all of this for one guy. You say, really? Well, he didn't do it for the one guy. He came to that region. No. Read the story. It was for this one guy, or the two, as we understand it from the other Gospels. Because as soon as he's delivered and the multitudes come out and say, leave, you know what Jesus does? He leaves. And he goes back where he came from. He risked his life, left the crowds, left the popularity. Essentially, from all that we can tell in the scripture, he did it all to bring freedom to one or two guys. And then he went back. All of that exertion, all of that travel, I don't understand all of that by my own evaluations of what matters. But that's really the point, isn't it? Jesus is seldom limited by our standards of evaluation. See, for me, I want to reach the multitude. For Jesus, he's willing to risk his life. He's willing to leave the crowd to go find the one who needed freedom. Even when surrounded by a multitude of people who didn't want to hear it and didn't want to receive it, Jesus was willing to risk his own life, interrupt his schedule, put himself at great personal discomfort so that one could be free. That's a calculus that doesn't fit the consumer capital mindset. And yet that seems to be Jesus' economy. It's not just Jesus I don't understand, it's this multitude. See, I guess I can begin to get that Jesus sees something different I can begin to understand that Jesus lives by a different motivation. But how about these people? How could they be so wrapped up in whatever it was they were wrapped up in that they took no joy in the restoration of a sound mind to an afflicted, destroyed individual? And it wasn't just his benefit, they benefited too. He harassed and caused trouble. And all they saw was, you need to go. They didn't care about the miracle. And there was some kind of a fear. The scriptures tell us that. They were afraid. When they heard the story of what happened, they were afraid. And I'm going, afraid? To me, you'd be afraid of the crazy man who cuts himself, screams all night long, and chases everybody and breaks chains. That's what you're afraid of. And they were afraid of Jesus, who spoke a word and set a guy free. They were afraid that he was clothed and in his right mind, sitting quietly, whole. That's what they were afraid of. There was some kind of fear that gripped their heart that caused them not to run to Jesus, but to push Jesus away. What was that fear? I don't know. Was it fear of change? I mean, the craziest thing is there are times in our own lives, I mean, apart from spiritual matters, apart from important spiritual realities and truth, but there's times in our own lives where we may experience a change that is good, for which there is maybe no negative, but it's just simply a change. And that in and of itself is enough reason that people don't want it, right? I mean, how many of you are people who just don't like change? I mean, change is really hard for you. That's okay, yeah. We've a couple of you. Yeah, there you go. Say, oh, thank you, I appreciate it. I see that hand, thank you. I like change. I tend to generally want change. But I'm amazed that here's a thing where there's no bad. It's all good. Could it possibly be that their fear was, what is this? And even though it's good, I don't want it because it's different? Or maybe it's a fear of change because they lost something. See, somebody was tending those pigs and somebody was buying those pigs. Somebody was planning a barbecue and was having pulled pork, and now it's gone. Could it be that they didn't want Jesus around because it cost them something? Yeah, probably. It's possible. Maybe they were afraid that because now we've got the Greeks who are upset that they lost their pigs, and the Jews who were tending those pigs lost their income to sell it to the Greeks. Maybe they were afraid conflict would come and uncertainty. And whenever there was conflict and uncertainty in the first century, the Romans had this really effective way of managing that. It's called killing people. And so maybe they were just afraid, hey, this is out of our ordinary, and if we have too much tumult in our area, the Roman centurions are going to wander in and there's going to be chaos. I don't know. All I know is, from what I can see, everything looks good. Freedom, hope, peace, miracle. Jesus leaves the multitude for the one experiences freedom, and the other multitude wants him to go away. It makes no sense. So here's my question for you. What do you do in the face of a moment like that? What is the fear that grips your heart? What uncertainty troubles you? Is it a fear? People? A fear of circumstances and change? A fear of failure? A fear of loss? See, there's two things I don't understand. The mission and the pursuit of a mission and the rejection of the good thing from that mission. And I will tell you today, in lives all over our society and all over the world, those same fears plague people. There's a fear about what Jesus demands when we obey him. That sometimes Jesus will take you out of your comfort zone, from a place of comfort and stability and popularity even, and take you in a direction, in a way that'll take you through a storm, through a difficulty, through a danger, and not to find another multitude on the other side, not to be bigger, better. Sometimes he'll take you through all of that because there's one. See, that's the mission of Jesus, right? He says, what shepherd, if he's lost one sheep, won't leave the 99 to go find the one? And that may cut against everything you value, everything you want. You want bigger, you want better, you want popularity, you want acceptance, you want the multitude, or you just want the comfort of what you know. But the mission of God is focused upon the reality that the soul, one broken individual, one hurting life can find hope through Jesus. And it doesn't matter the multitudes you have to leave behind or the storms you have to go through, and it doesn't matter how long you stay there, but to bring freedom in the name of Jesus to one is worth it in the calculus of God. And yet we're afraid of what that may mean to us. I'm going to tell you, there is a call of God on each and every one of you that is very much like the man who was set free. Because he said, I want to come with you, Jesus. I want to hang out with you. And Jesus says, no, you've got a more important thing. You need to go back to your own community and tell them tell those people what I've done for you. You have a mission. Fear will rob you of that mission. But then there's that other group that's afraid to accept Jesus because what's it going to do to them? Maybe it's just change, or you're afraid of the upheaval it may cause in your life, or you may be afraid of what others may think or want. You may be afraid of the loss that it may bring. I'm going to tell you, listen carefully. This may not be popular and it may not preach well, but I think it's a truth. If you're going to follow Jesus, it will cost you something. I mean, let that sink in. If they were going to follow Jesus, it was going to cost them a herd of pigs, potential uncertainty, and unrest. And that fear was too great to experience the freedom that they could have had. It will cost you. You say, well, really, Pastor? I thought we just get good things, right? It's just grace. Yeah, of course it's grace. And of course the good is beyond the measure of good. I mean, it's eternal ramifications. But I'm going to tell you, there's a reason Jesus said, take up your cross and follow me. You follow Jesus, it'll probably cost you something. Probably going to cost you something. And how many times have people pulled back because they're afraid of what others may think or say? This is a moment on both sides of great question of why. My prayer for you is, may the fear of people, of change, of uncertainty, never keep us from being and doing what he's called us to. We're going to prepare to receive this morning communion. And I want us to prepare our hearts, because in this moment we have a very clear picture of the change that comes when we follow Jesus. We have to put aside fear and uncertainty and embrace his call and his purpose. We got to be willing to understand his priorities. We got to count the cost and follow the way.